Websites and apps cost you way more than you think. Right now, as you're watching this, there are hidden tricks on most major platforms designed to make you spend thousands more than you planned. Whether that's buying products, signing up for subscriptions, or canceling services. Most people think the obvious tricks are the worst ones. Things like countdown timers, confirm shaming banners, or pop-ups screaming about limited time deals. And sure, these can be annoying, but here's what most people don't realize. The subtle hidden tricks are actually draining your wallet far more effectively, and you might not ever notice. As a UX designer, I hear about these tricks all the time. So I'm gonna show you how they work, why they work, and the 4 specific tricks that you need to watch out for to protect your money. Let me show you what I mean. I recently wanted to buy a $4 domain, but by the time I got to the checkout, it was over $130. How? 2 secret design tricks that I bet you've fallen for too. I went to the GoDaddy website to find a domain name. Of course, the .com's always taken. And I noticed the price was just under $4, down from $101, a saving of 8 trillion%. I was a little skeptical of how cheap it was, so I added it to my cart. That's when the actual price appeared, a decidedly not $4 amount of $105. In small text so far away, I completely missed it the first time and went to the cart. This technique, hiding information, is a subtle but very effective way that companies can get you to take an action that's favorable to them. In this case, adding a domain to my cart. When I pressed the big button, a domain protection feature was pre-selected by default. This increased the cost of my purchase to over $130. I also noticed I was being automatically signed up for auto renewal in 2027, when I've long forgotten about this failed project, for $202. The pre-selected default time period is for 2 years. Defaults are another subtle but powerful design choice companies can make to get you to spend more money. If you select 1 year, the price drops to under $4.
You are joking, aren't you?
Also, you'll notice that the renewal information is in a subtler grey colour. Why would this colour be used when we have a perfectly good black or dark grey used for all the other information? Here's my redesigned version of this website. Here, you're clearly shown the price upfront before you add it to your cart. And what about instead of automatically signing me up for auto renewal, you just made that an option that I could opt into? Honestly, ask yourself, would you add this to your cart as quickly as you might have in the first version? Probably not. There are way worse examples of products and services online that are downright frustrating or manipulative, and many of these have ended up on the radar of various regulators around the world. And I'll cover a few of these cases shortly. But the point is that subtle design tricks that persuade or even manipulate you don't raise much suspicion. They're in the Goldilocks zone for a company, enough to get you to spend more or share more data than you wanted to, but not enough to provoke an angry backlash. And yes, maybe you won't fall for these tricks, although you probably have at some point, but anyone else you know that is less technically savvy, time poor, or educated might. Those on lower incomes are also more impacted because more of their internet usage happens on a phone screen. And on these smaller screens, more details are hidden in tooltips or beneath mountains of scrolling. By the way, this video summarizes a lot of the examples and information in the excellent book Deceptive Designs by Harry Brignall. If you're at all interested in this topic, I highly recommend picking up a copy of his book. Here's the most interesting part about that GoDaddy story. I almost didn't notice the most expensive trick they were using. It's called pre-selection or pressured selling, and it's so subtle that most people don't even realize they're being manipulated. Pre-selection is when a company pre-selects a default option that favors them the most. The 2-year domain length and renewal, the $30 protection plan, all selected by default before I even saw them. Here's how to spot it. Whenever you're buying something online, look for any pre-checked boxes or pre-selected options. Ask yourself, is this pre-selected because it's the best thing for you or for them? Defaults are one of the most powerful design choices a company can make online, and that's because they take advantage of the default bias or the status quo effect, which is the tendency to stick with what you currently have. This can be due to things like a lack of knowledge or just inertia. A great example of the default effect in action is in your choice of search engine and browser. Have you ever changed the default search engine in your phone's browser? Were you ever informed about the different search engine options or given a list to choose from? Probably not if you use Safari or Chrome, which is why the Department of Justice in the US recently won a case alleging Google has a monopoly on search. Documents from the case show now CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, was concerned about Safari making Google its default search engine because of the user experience and optics of the deal. A significant percentage of most people will leave the default as is. In their book Nudge, Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein mention that changing options from an opt-in to an opt-out can raise participation rates by 25%. This is great if you want people to take advantage of a government benefit, for example, but it's bad if you want to make people spend more money. A savvy product team working for a company that sells things online can predefine and pre-select options in products and services that benefit them, not you. Indiegogo, the crowdfunding platform, uses defaults to give themselves a tip. The main way a person using this site would notice the extra charge is via the total amount figure. This would be obviously different to the initial amount you wanted to contribute. The only way to avoid this tip is to go into this box, select the other amount option, and then type in $0. The reality of it is that there's a sizable group of people who will not do this, meaning they'll overpay. The page that explains this tip mentions that it keeps Indiegogo's platform running, and that the 5% platform fee hasn't been raised in 15 years as a badge of honor. Indiegogo obviously really cares about the people and businesses that use its platform to fund their dream projects. Why not extend that to backers as well? They could easily take a page out of ticket seller and hotel booking websites and add an upfront fee. They kind of already do this with their 5% platform fee, just not to backers. Defaults can be used to influence behavior. Think about it honestly. Which of these two screens would make you tip more? This is actually from a study that showed that showing higher default tip amounts in taxis leads to a higher tip on average, although it did also increase the number of people that left no tip. You'll also often see defaults used when you're choosing how to pay for an app or a service. The usual pattern is to show you 2 or more options, an expensive monthly option, and then a pre-selected annual option. And yes, the annual plan might be better value if you use the service for the full year. If you instead pay the higher monthly fee but then cancel at the end of the month, you'll obviously pay less. Imagine if the plans in Strava just showed you both options with no pre-selections. How many more people do you think would sign up for the monthly plan? Defaults and pre-selections are powerful, but they're nothing compared to the next trick. It's even worse because it's so hard to notice, and that's kind of the whole point. Hiding information is another potent but subtle way that companies can get you to take actions that are favorable to them. I want to go back to my domain search to show you how this works. Let's visit another site and compare prices. I actually had to check this a few times because I kept thinking I was accidentally pressing the wrong button or adding in a bundle instead of just the domain that I wanted. But no, items were being intentionally added to my cart. The advertised price was $14.49 and now it's almost $31. A website builder, email service, and extra domain have been added to my cart. I can't immediately see what the cost of these items will be once the free trial ends. I have to go further into my cart to actually get this information. Some of these extras manually expire and some of them don't, meaning I could be on the hook for auto renewal if I don't watch out. In a few months, when this email service automatically renews, I could be on the hook for over $170. And if I don't turn off automatic renewal for the website builder, that'll cost me another $50. And in a year, if I don't cancel this extra domain, this will cost me over $90. Also, you'll notice that an extra feature has been automatically added to my original domain expiry protection, whatever that is. This example also shows another deceptive design technique called the sneak into basket. This particular example is a hidden subscription where I'm being signed up for services under the guise of a free trial. Interestingly, this same site paid over $56,000 in fees to the ACCC because its website builder and extra domain were previously labeled as free. Even the people who design these things are hilariously not immune to it. Figma, the exact software probably used by most designers around the world, used a combination of design tricks, including hiding information, up until recently. To share your designs with a client or someone else in a business, you had this nifty share button, and you could allow them to either edit or just view the file. If you clicked edit, this would actually create a whole new subscription for the person. You can read numerous horror stories of design managers racking up bills of sometimes as high as $20,000 because of this trick.
Excuse me?
Key information can be hidden in a fine print section on a page or moved to a completely different page. Sometimes this information might be in a smaller text size, in a subtle color, or moved to a less prominent location. Before any purchase, actively hunt for the details you'll need to know before you can make a decision. Screenshot or write down what you're actually going to pay for something once the promotion ends. Hidden information is so powerful because it makes important information seem irrelevant. Otherwise, why wouldn't it be more prominently displayed? It can often be combined with the next technique to be even more influential. The last subtle design trick you need to know about is obstruction, or indicating that you'll need to do work to decline an offer or cancel a service. So instead of a button just saying no to an advertisement or an offer, it might say something like other options. Cookie consent banners across the internet are a garbage bin fire of design tricks, but they often use this one specifically. On this website, you're given the option to either accept all the cookies this website wants you to, or you can click the customize button and manually go in and reject them. Once you're in this screen, you have to again click the much subtler button to actually reject these cookies. Now, I don't know about you, but just seeing the word customize is enough to make my eyes glaze over and make me accept the easier option. And research into cookie banners has shown that most people rarely make it onto the second page. Compare this with banners that let you reject all non-essential cookies with the press of one button, with each button looking as equally prominent as each other. Look at the difference in the orange bars to see how many more people will reject non-essential cookies if the reject button is on the banner itself, like in the last examples I showed, versus putting it behind a button. But obstruction can get way more aggressive than cookie banners. I recently signed up for my local newspaper because there was a special price. When I wanted to cancel, I assumed I could do this online because that's how I signed up, but I actually had to call up to do it. Just seeing those cancellation instructions with a phone number made me put it off for weeks. And that's exactly what they're counting on. You become their best customer, someone paying for a service and not using it. Amazon Prime takes this to an art form. Just try cancelling it and you'll see what I mean. You click End Membership and you're taken to a screen that looks a lot like you've just cancelled. The heading in blue highlighted text makes it seem like you're done. Why else would you highlight the number of days left? But that's not actually the cancellation. It's a setup for more obstruction. The cancellation button is buried at the bottom of the page, after all the options that are more favorable to Amazon. On mobile, it's even worse because you won't even see this button unless you scroll down, and many probably won't. And when you finally click it, it says continue to cancel, meaning there's yet another screen waiting for you. The button right underneath the heading implying that you've just cancelled just takes you back to do more shopping. This particular type of obstruction is called a roach motel, when it's easier to sign up for something than it is to cancel. It's gotten so bad that the FTC in the USA in 2024 announced a click to cancel rule, where it must be as easy to cancel a service as it was to sign up for it. Amazon's currently facing a lawsuit from the FTC over this exact practice, and for signing people up to Amazon Prime without their consent.
God, that's even worse.
The techniques I've just shown you are insidious. They're powerful and subtle. But there's one more design trick that's the complete opposite. It's not subtle at all, but it's so powerful it still works even when you know what's happening and you're skeptical of it. This technique is called reference pricing, and there's a lot of evidence behind it. This is when companies show a higher was price next to the current price, making it seem like a good deal. It's not necessarily manipulative, it all depends on the was price. Is this a real accurate price that the product was actually sold for in the past? Australia's competition regulator recently took our two largest supermarkets to court over misleading pricing. They found the supermarkets were jacking up prices temporarily, then slashing them to prices that were actually higher than the original cost. In one example, a pack of Oreos went from a regular price of $3.50 to $5 and then back down to $4.50 with a was price of $5. Customers thought they were getting a really good deal when they were actually paying $1 more than what they would have previously. In another recent example, the ACCC took a website called Emma Sleep to court over the same issue. It found that 58 out of 74 products had not previously been for sale at the strike-through price or a price equivalent to the price without the claimed discount. It also used a fake countdown timer to imply that prices would only be available for a short period of time, and when the countdown reached 0, it would just reset. There's strong evidence that reference prices makes customers think that the value of a product is higher, makes them more likely to buy, and lowers the chance that they'll look for better deals. This is stronger for products bought less frequently and for products and brands that you're less familiar with. It even works when people are skeptical of the reference price or when the reference price is meaningless.
I'm scared too.
Reference pricing works because it takes advantage of the anchoring effect. This is where we used external information, in this case the crossed out was price, to adjust our valuation of an offer. So now you know how to spot these tricks: defaults and pre-selections, hidden information, obstruction, and reference prices. But knowing about them individually isn't enough. When companies combine these gentle nudges together, they can become even more effective. A 2021 study showed this perfectly. Researchers built different versions of the same website. One normal control version, one with mild deceptive patterns, and then one that had aggressive manipulative techniques. A deceptive or dark pattern is a user interface design choice on a website or an app. It leads consumers to make choices that are often not in their best interests, or as the coiner of the term, Harry Brignall, explains, a user interface that has been carefully crafted to trick users into doing things such as buying insurance with their purchase or signing up for recurring bills. The results of the test were striking. The control version got 11.3% of people to accept an offer. The mild deceptive version jumped to 25.8%. The aggressive version hit 41.9%, almost 4 times the original rate. So wow, the worst deceptive patterns had a massive increase in the amount of sales they got. That's the headline, right? Wrong.
Excuse me?
The researchers specifically called out the milder deceptive patterns as being the most dangerous. This is because they significantly increased acceptance of an offer, aka sales, without alienating customers. In other words, you want just enough deception to raise sales without being noticeable. Just to show the power behind these subtle design tricks, here's my recreation of what the mild option would have looked like. Just by making the business's preferred option the default choice, adding the recommended label, and making the decline button imply extra work through the wording other options, doubled acceptance of the offer. The more aggressive manipulative patterns were much more likely to increase sales, but also made users angry. You can see this reflected in the number of people who dropped out during the test. It went from 9 in the mild group to 65 in the aggressive group. This is why understanding individual techniques isn't enough. Companies don't use these in isolation. They weave them together to make an experience that seems natural while steering your decisions. And the most effective combinations are the ones you never notice at all. Okay, so that was research. What about the real world? Unfortunately for us, dodgy design techniques have snuck their way into the products and services we use because they work, and there are either no or minimal penalties for using them, although this is changing slowly. How well do these techniques work? Really well. In 2021, researchers reviewed data from StubHub, a ticket sales website, where different versions of deceptive patterns had been shown to millions of visitors. They split users into two groups. One saw ticket prices with all fees included up front. The other saw lower prices initially with fees added later at checkout. This is also known as drip pricing. The results were staggering. The group that were shown fees later on spent 21% more than the other group. Not only were they spending more, but they were also paying for more expensive seats in better rows. Even though 45% more people were abandoning their cart at checkout after seeing the fees, the people who remained were spending so much more that it was still profitable. Think about that psychology for a second. You see a $50 ticket, and then by the end of the checkout process, that's become $80 or $100. You're annoyed, but you've invested time looking for these seats and adding your details. Drip pricing is alive and well elsewhere on the internet when you're doing things like booking movie tickets. The data from the StubHub experiment is a little dated at this point, so I went on their website and I noticed something else that was interesting. When I was checking events in Australia, the prices on the seat map were exclusive of fees. I had to add all my personal information to StubHub before I could even see the final price. And in this example, it went from $244 each ticket for a total of $488 to $718. But here's the kicker. When I looked at events in the US, the prices were all inclusive of fees. It turns out that StubHub was recently sued by the Washington DC Attorney General for junk fees and drip pricing, this very issue. And the FTC under Lina Khan has also recently outlawed junk fees. This isn't unique to StubHub. Companies can make changes in one location to appease their local regulators and then not make those same changes in other geographies. Now, I know Australia and the US have had our differences. Sure, we wear shorter shorts, ride kangaroos to work, and call flip-flops thongs, but surely our brains are the same. Companies clearly don't think so. The evidence is overwhelming. These tactics work, they're used at massive scales, and companies are getting more sophisticated about how they use them. But how did we even get to this point to begin with? Companies didn't start out trying to trick us, but the internet made it incredibly easy to measure exactly what makes us spend money, and that changed everything. In his book Deceptive Patterns, Harry Brignall explains that modern web design, in the way it's used for products and services, is much more about persuading and influencing people to make money for a business, and less about the decorative aspects of design. This, combined with extremely easy access to business metrics, means that businesses know exactly how to raise their key numbers. And they can rapidly test design changes to their websites and apps to drive these numbers up. Most companies selling products and services online will have a constant schedule of tests to try and increase their revenue. So you're up against whole teams of professionals. The best metaphor I've seen for this comes from the book Nudge. Think of yourself like a beginner chess player or Call of Duty or Fortnite player playing against someone who has hundreds or thousands of hours of experience. You're going to lose every time. Here's how it works. A company creates a new, slightly different version of their site and splits their visitors in half. Some see the old version, some see the new one. The best teams and companies track everything, not just how many more times a button gets clicked, but how it changes a user's behavior and the long-term value of that user. If the new test version sees a better result, it wins, and the winning design becomes the default for everyone. Competitors are watching companies like hawks, so if they notice a new change, they might copy and test it. Deceptive design practices can give companies a leg up over their competitors. This means that businesses that use deceptive patterns can become the dominant players in their industry. The key objectives for teams working in these kind of businesses are things like getting you to increase your average card amount, create an account, or stay subscribed for longer. As Harry Brignall says, instead of you being a partner that a business wants to reach mutual success with, you're just a commodity. And there's a constant demand for growth in most companies. One of the easier ways a company can continue to grow is by testing tweaks to things like visual hierarchy and layout and prices to increase revenue or stop customers from leaving. My intention here isn't to attack the professionals that work in these companies. I myself am a UX designer. There are lots of good people in these companies trying their best to create a win-win for both the business and the user. In addition, sometimes these deceptive designs aren't even intentional. They can be the result of a metrics-obsessed company culture or just careless A/B testing. You can sometimes see this tension playing out real time in places like Reddit. The person in this Reddit thread was using a 2024 version of an Adobe product and kept getting bombarded with pop-ups telling them to upgrade and presumably spend more money. An Adobe employee was actively in the comments explaining that even though teams are aware of the issue, it'll take time to fix. Similarly, Figma employees were also commenting on Reddit posts about their accidental subscription problem at least almost a year before they addressed it. It might not seem like it, but in many countries, there are regulations protecting people from deceptive designs. The problem, as Harry Brignall says, is not so much the laws, but the enforcement of the laws. Because deceptive designs can be subtle and intricate, they can be slow and costly to prove legally. Combine this with only so much government budget and you get where we are today. The EU's DMA and DSA are good examples of recent regulations that have the power to fight deceptive practices. They can give companies hefty fines and even ban them from the EU. They're not perfect and they're mostly aimed at large companies, meaning smaller companies can slip through. In the US, the FTC has been on the offensive against companies using deceptive designs. In 2023, it ordered Epic Games to refund customers $245 million for using deceptive patterns to trick users, many who are children, into making unintended purchases in the game Fortnite. The FTC report goes into intricate detail about how Epic Games did this, but essentially, it boiled down to letting kids buy in-game items using stored payment information without parental consent. They did this through a variety of deceptive patterns. One trick was to make you opt in to make a one-off payment. This means that your credit card details were saved for future purchases by default, which is usually the opposite of what you would expect to happen. Probably the worst example though was making it way too easy to accidentally purchase cosmetic items in its store. Because there was no confirmation required after buying something, customers could accidentally press a button and then immediately buy something in the store.
If I were to choose one, oh no, 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 no. Looks like, no, 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 no. God, no, no.
Of course, they did require confirmation for refund requests. On top of this, the buttons for previewing and purchasing were swapped when viewing battle passes. You really had to watch what you were doing to make sure you avoided accidentally buying something. The most interesting thing about this case though is you can see exactly how much Epic Games knew about this issue before they were forced to do something about it. It shows a lot about how company culture can enable this sort of deception. In 2018, executives and managers discussed adding a confirm purchase button, but the company thought it would add friction, making people second guess their purchase and reduce the number of impulse purchases. You can even see how one UX designer recommended adding a hold to purchase mechanic, which would reduce the number of accidental purchases being made without adding too much friction. This is the win-win I was talking to you about earlier, and a reminder that lots of good people work in these companies. In fact, this case shows the stories of many different employees raising these issues over the years. According to the FTC's filing, Epic only added a form of payment confirmation for one type of its item, its battle passes, in June 2020, and only after learning the FTC was investigating it. Another great thing about this case is you can see the quantifiable impact a deceptive design can have. According to the filing, in 2019, Epic Games added a prominent undo button to its Fortnite user interface. This had the intended effect and enabled players to easily reverse unwanted purchases. Obviously though, this worked a little too well. This was later made smaller, moved to the bottom of the screen, and players were forced to press and hold a button to actually finalize the cancellation. This change reduced the number of cancellations by 35%. That's how effective these design choices can be. According to the FTC's filing, Epic Games received over 1 million complaints about this issue. Okay, so that's where we are now, but AI could potentially make this worse. Because AI models are trained on publicly existing websites, And because many websites use deceptive patterns, this means that the AI output for user interfaces could include deceptive patterns. When I asked Google Stitch to create a cancellation flow for a modern software subscription service for a product called Plumbus World, it created a cancellation flow with 4 steps, one of which was an unnecessary "why are you cancelling" screen, while the second last screen attempted to get users to consider pausing or doing something else other than cancelling. This means if AI is used to design more websites and apps in the future, we could have more of these deceptive patterns baked in by default. Instead of companies having to intentionally design manipulative or deceptive patterns, they'll get them automatically. It's scaling up the problem exponentially. Okay, so that's possibly terrifying, but there are some things you can do right now. In fact, there are just 3 checks you can do that shouldn't take more than a couple minutes whenever you're buying something online. First, hunt for hidden info. Do you have all the information that you need to make an informed decision? Do you know if this service will auto-renew? Are there any hidden fees? Do a quick search on Google or Reddit if in doubt. Second, check for pre-selections. Has anything been pre-selected for you by default? Is this selected because it's good for you or for the business? Third, compare prices whenever you're buying anything. Just do a quick Google search and see what else is available. These small design choices can have massive financial impacts. By just being aware of these 4 tricks, you're ahead of most people who have no idea that they're being manipulated. But knowing these tricks is only half the battle. You can actually fight back. If you feel ripped off by a deceptive design, you can report it to your local government body. In the USA, this is the FTC, and in Australia, this is usually the ACCC. I've seen complaints from regular people in some of these reports and legal filings, so they are important. So next time you're about to buy something, just pause for 30 seconds and run through these checks. Your wallet will thank you. Thanks for watching.